When a narcissistic woman tells a man, "I'm not like other women," it sounds flattering, almost mystical. It carries the promise of rarity, of someone who stands apart from the ordinary. But psychologically, this line is not about uniqueness. It is about creating a fracture in your perception. She wants you to believe you have discovered something exceptional, something that others missed. Jung often spoke about the archetype of the exceptional other, the figure who appears to offer transcendence, but ultimately serves as a mirror of our unconscious vulnerabilities. This is exactly the mechanism at play. The statement is crafted to bypass your rational judgment and appeal directly to your ego. It makes you feel chosen, and once you feel chosen, you become far more willing to overlook inconsistencies, red flags, and behaviors that would normally alert your intuition. The narcissistic personality relies heavily on this early seduction stage because it sets the psychological foundation for later control. If you believe she is different, then any deviation from healthy behavior can be rationalized as complexity rather than manipulation. This claim of uniqueness also serves another purpose. It isolates you. She subtly implies that other women are predictable, shallow, or unworthy, and by accepting this worldview, you unconsciously shrink your emotional universe to revolve around her. You begin to see her reactions, her approval, her opinions as the central reference point for your worth. That's how dependency forms, not through force, but through the illusion of emotional rarity. But the irony is profound. The very thing she claims to be, unique, is precisely what she is not. Narcissistic women use the same patterns, the same statements, the same emotional hooks, because these are not expressions of individuality. They are strategies of survival for an unstable ego. Her identity shifts depending on what will secure admiration and control in the moment. What you are seeing is not uniqueness, it is performance. If a person truly possessed depth, they wouldn't need to announce it. Authenticity reveals itself quietly, consistently, and without pressure. When you encounter someone who declares their difference right away, observe what they are trying to make you feel rather than what they are trying to make you see. And if you remember nothing else, remember this: anyone who insists they are unlike the rest is usually hiding the fact that they are exactly the same. When she tells you, "You're overthinking, that never happened," you are not hearing confusion, you are hearing strategy. This is gaslighting in its purest form, and it is one of the most psychologically disorienting tools a narcissistic woman uses. Jung often spoke about the tension between the conscious and the unconscious, and how a person's reality can be quietly reshaped when their inner compass is weakened. Gaslighting targets that compass directly. It makes you doubt what you saw, what you heard, and eventually, what you know. The moment you begin second, guessing your own perceptions, she gains the psychological advantage. It is not enough for her to influence how you feel. She wants to control how you interpret reality itself. And that is where this line becomes so dangerous. When she denies the truth with confidence, it forces you into a mental conflict. You can trust your own intuition, or you can trust the person you care about. Most men, especially those trying to maintain peace, choose the latter. They surrender their inner truth to preserve the relationship. Gaslighting works because it subtly rewires the emotional bond. Once she convinces you that your memory is flawed or your reaction is excessive, she becomes the interpreter of events. She becomes the final authority on what is reasonable and what is irrational. And soon, you find yourself apologizing for things she caused, defending behaviors she orchestrated, or suppressing your intuition because it no longer feels reliable. This internal collapse is not an accident. It is the point. A narcissistic woman cannot tolerate a partner who sees clearly. She needs you to doubt yourself, so her behavior remains unquestioned. If you were anchored in your own truth, the relationship would crumble instantly. So she destabilizes you slowly, subtly, and repeatedly until your certainty erodes. And when a man loses his certainty, he loses the ability to walk away. What makes gaslighting so psychologically destructive is that it doesn't just distort your perception of her, it distorts your perception of yourself. Jung believed that the most profound suffering occurs when a person becomes alienated from their own inner voice. Gaslighting creates that alienation. It turns your mind into unfamiliar territory. If you take anything from this, let it be this. The moment someone convinces you to doubt what you already know, they are not protecting the relationship, they are protecting their control. When she says, "I just want what's best for us," it often carries the tone of care, of shared purpose, even sacrifice. But if you look closely, really closely, you'll notice that the definition of best always conveniently aligns with her desires, her comfort, her emotional landscape. This is the subtle brilliance of narcissistic framing. She doesn't force you to comply. She convinces you that her will is the natural direction of the relationship. Jung often emphasized that manipulation becomes most dangerous when it masquerades as virtue, because then it bypasses our defenses and appeals to our moral identity. And that is exactly what happens here. The statement functions as a psychological shield. By presenting her demands as something meant for both of you, she avoids accountability and positions herself as the guardian of the relationship. If you resist, suddenly you're not disagreeing with her. You're disagreeing with the supposed well-being of the relationship itself. This is how she creates emotional leverage. Her preferences become principles. Her needs become obligations. Her comfort becomes your responsibility. Over time, this dynamic conditions you to ignore your own needs. You sacrifice your boundaries, your time, your energy, because you believe you're contributing to something shared. But the truth is that the word was in her vocabulary is merely a disguise for me. Your role is to support, agree, and adapt, while she remains the fixed point around which everything must revolve. And when you begin to show signs of fatigue or frustration, she will remind you, again, that she only wants what's best, subtly implying that you're the one standing in the way of harmony. It's important to understand that this is not how genuine love operates. Real partnership involves negotiation, mutual sacrifice, and the willingness to adapt for one another. But narcissistic love is one-directional. It demands devotion without offering reciprocity. It expects emotional labor without providing emotional safety. And it frames selfishness as wisdom, so you feel guilty for questioning it. The tragedy is that many men stay in these situations because they believe they are doing the right thing. They believe they're being loyal, patient, supportive. But you cannot save a relationship that only exists to serve one person's ego, and you cannot build a future with someone who treats your needs as threats. So remember this: when someone hides control inside the language of love, they're not protecting the relationship. They're protecting their power. When she tells you, "My ex was crazy," it sounds like a harmless confession, even a vulnerable moment. But in the psychology of narcissism, this statement is rarely genuine. It is a carefully crafted narrative designed to shape your perception before you have the chance to form your own judgment. Jung often noted that people project the disowned parts of themselves onto others. A narcissistic woman does this instinctively by painting her past partner as unstable or toxic. She redirects attention away from her own patterns and assigns the blame elsewhere. In her story, she is always the misunderstood victim, never the architect of conflict. This line serves a deeper purpose. It prepares the psychological stage for how she wants you to interpret her future behavior. If she becomes erratic, dramatic, or hostile, you are already primed to excuse it. After all, she has been hurt before. If she lashes out, you may think it's trauma. If she manipulates, you may think it's self-protection. In reality, she's conditioning you to tolerate behavior you would never accept under normal circumstances. The narrative of the crazy ex also isolates you emotionally. It implies that anyone who came before you failed her, misunderstood her, or couldn't handle her depth. Now, you are positioned as the savior, the exception, the one who finally gets her. That illusion of exceptionalism is intoxicating. It makes you believe you're different from the men she describes. But the truth is, you are simply the next chapter in the same story she's been telling for years. What's rarely acknowledged is that a narcissistic woman cannot afford to take responsibility for the collapse of her relationships. Doing so would confront her with the very parts of herself she cannot face: her insecurity, her selfishness, her emotional volatility. It is psychologically safer for her to rewrite history, to portray herself as the innocent party and everyone else as unstable. This allows her to maintain her internal narrative of superiority and righteousness. But pay close attention. How she speaks about the past is exactly how she will speak about you when the relationship ends. The same dismissive, contemptuous language she uses for the man before you will one day be directed at your name. You are not hearing truth. You are hearing rehearsal. So keep this in mind. A person who demonizes everyone behind them is quietly warning you of who they will become when you no longer serve their story. When she says, "I'm only this emotional because I love you so much," it can sound tender, even poetic. But in the psychology of narcissism, heightened emotion is rarely an expression of genuine depth. It's a tactic, one designed to overwhelm you, soften your boundaries, and make you responsible for her internal chaos. Jung often spoke of how individuals project their unresolved inner turmoil outward, and the narcissistic personality does this to an extreme. Her emotional displays are not reflections of love. They are instruments of influence. What makes this tactic so powerful is that it disguises manipulation as vulnerability. She learns very quickly that intensity can replace intimacy, instead of building trust through consistency. She manufactures connection through emotional theatrics, crying when confronted, escalating minor issues into crises, or acting devastated when you express a simple boundary. These reactions are calculated, not necessarily consciously, but instinctively as survival strategies for a fragile ego. A narcissistic woman relies on emotional impact to maintain control because, without it, she fears becoming irrelevant. Over time, you begin to adapt to her emotional climate. You tread carefully around her moods. You try to avoid triggering her reactions. And eventually, you become responsible for her emotional regulation, something no healthy adult should demand of another. This is how dependency forms, not because she is deeply connected to you, but because she has conditioned you to manage her instability. The tragedy is that many men mistake this intensity for passion. They think the tears, the anger, the dramatic swings are evidence of a profound emotional bond. But emotional chaos is not love. It's a form of psychological pressure. Genuine love expresses itself through steadiness, patience, and emotional responsibility. Manipulative love expresses itself through storms designed to keep you off balance. What Jung understood, and what many people struggle to see, is that the person who weaponizes emotion is not trying to connect with you. They are trying to control the environment. Their goal is not harmony, but dominance over how you feel. Because if they can influence your feelings, they can influence your decisions. So remember this simple truth. Love does not demand that you sacrifice your peace to soothe someone else's storms. Anyone who uses emotional chaos to keep you close is not showing devotion. They're showing dependence on your compliance. When she tells you, "You'll never find someone like me," it's framed as a compliment, almost a warning wrapped in affection. But this statement is not about love, connection, or uniqueness. It is about fear, more specifically, the fear she wants you to internalize. Jung often observed that the psyche uses fear to maintain control when it senses a threat to its dominance. A narcissistic woman does the same. When she feels you pulling away, becoming more self-assured, or simply waking up to the reality of her behavior, she doesn't respond with self-reflection. She responds with psychological intimidation disguised as emotional sincerity. This line is intended to plant a seed of doubt in your mind. It makes you question your ability to find love again, to rebuild your life, to choose someone healthier. She wants you to believe she is irreplaceable, not because she actually is, but because the idea of you realizing she is not terrifies her. Narcissistic control depends on limiting your imagination, shrinking your sense of possibility, and convincing you that what you have with her is the best you will ever experience. But the irony is unmistakable. The very statement meant to elevate her actually reveals her deepest insecurity. She knows that if you saw her without the theatrics, the emotional manipulation, the seductive charm, you would recognize there is nothing rare about her behavior. It is predictable, cyclical, and identical to countless others who operate from the same emotional wounds. What she calls irreplaceable is simply the familiar pattern of narcissistic dependency. This is why the phrase carries so much emotional charge. It hits that ancient fear Jung described, the fear of the unknown, the fear of abandonment, the fear of starting over. She weaponizes that fear so you remain attached not out of love, but out of uncertainty. And the longer you stay in that psychological fog, the more you confuse fear with attachment and confusion with loyalty. But here is the truth many men don't realize until much later. The moment someone uses fear to keep you close, the relationship has already lost its foundation. Love does not need to threaten. Love does not need to imply scarcity. Love does not need to insist on its own uniqueness. So let the message land clearly. Anyone who tells you that you'll never find better is silently admitting they know you can.